And what we're going to do is we're going to look at a brief that was written on behalf of a patient who's trying to bring a claim against their doctor, and then we're going to see that brief refocused by a really great teacher at the University of Chicago named Joe Williams. So, Mr. Lewis, can you read for us the beginning part of this brief?
A patient whose reactions go unmonitored may also claim physician liability. In this case, a patient took Chloramax as prescribed, which resulted in partial renal failure.
Keep going.
The manufacturer's literature indicated that the patient should be observed frequently and should immediately report any sign of infection.
Keep going.
Evidence indicated that the patient had not received instructions to report any signs of urinary blockage.
Finally.
Moreover, the patient had no white cell count taken until after he developed the blockage.
So this is something that you're kind of used to reading in your casebook. And Mr. Lewis, we're going to talk through the really big error here. And it's an error of the force of focus. Who's the subject of pretty much every sentence?
The patient.
Who do we think may have messed up when we read that?
The patient.
Yeah. Why is it really understandable that this happens all the time in the child advocacy clinic and the human trafficking clinic and every other student clinic that I've worked with? Your client is the patient. Why is it understandable that you tell the story through their eyes?
Your impulse is to sympathize with them, so you make them the focus of all the actions without thinking.
Why is it a problem in this case?
If they're the focus of all the actions, then they're also the one people are going to blame.
Exactly. And it's just a switch of language. So we're going to go through this line by line to see how you can do this better. But remember this, when you get a brief, your client might not be the focus of your first few paragraphs. You might want to focus the attention on something else. So, Mr. Jordan, we'll work through this together. So this is the bad version. Read it again.
A patient whose reactions go unmonitored may also claim physician liability.
Here's the rewrite by Joe Williams.
If a physician does not monitor her patient's reactions, she may be held liable.
Let's see the force of focus. In the first one, on the patient. On the second one, on the physician. And by doing that, you get a second shot of saying this person acted badly. Next one, Mr. Jordan.
In this case, a patient took Chloramax as prescribed, which resulted in partial renal failure.
The better version by Joe Williams.
In this case, the physician prescribed Chloramax, which caused the patient to experience partial renal failure.
And again, it's just the switch of the subject from the patient to the physician. And when you do that switch, you get to throw in that italics part, right? It's a sense which caused the patient to experience. It's not as if you have to leave the patient out of this. But what you want the association to be for the patient is that they're experiencing pain, not that they're doing bad things. Next one.
The manufacturer's literature indicated that the patient should be observed frequently and should immediately report any sign of infection.
Better rewrite.
The physician had been cautioned by the manufacturer's literature that she should observe the patient frequently and instruct the patient to report any sign of infection.
And this example is important because it takes a little bit of work. It's not just switching out patient to physician. You really have to reimagine what it means to respond to literature. In the first one, we have the manufacturer is something that the patient didn't read. In the second one, any piece of literature in the medical field is something that cautions doctors. If you didn't follow that, you're messing up. Last one.
Evidence indicated the patient had not received instructions to report any sign of urinary blockage. Evidence indicates that the physician also failed to instruct the patient to report any signs of urinary blockage.
And again, we have that force of focus, but now we have something even better. Talk me through the help of that also. Why is that effective?
It actually places blame directly on the physician. The physician had a failure of a certain kind.
Yeah, and it also has the sense of being cumulative, of here's a list of all the things. That also is a writerly move. That also is the move that you need to think about in your briefs, in your motions for summary judgment, in your reports to your partners at your law firm. How can I convey the total experience here, not just the single experience? How do my sentences relate to each other? So, Ms. Rathel, when we talk about force of focus, we're really talking about two things.
Blame and responsibility.
Right. In the first one, the patient's blame. In the second one, it's the physician. And you have to think about, where do you want the blame? Where do you want the responsibility?